Welcome to the Cyber Rants Podcast, where we're all about sharing the forbidden secrets and slightly embellished truths about corporate cybersecurity programs. We're ranting, we're raving, and we're telling you the stuff that nobody talks about on their fancy website and trade show giveaways, all to protect you from cyber criminals. And now, here's your hosts, Mike Rotondo, Zach Fuller, and Lauro Chavez.
Hello and welcome to the Cyber Rants Podcast. This is your co-host, Zach Fuller, joined by Mike Rotondo and Lauro Chavez. And today we have a special guest, Cammas Freeman. Cammas, thank you for joining us. Appreciate you joining us on the show today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
We are going to dive into how to find and maybe more importantly, retain cybersecurity and IT talent. Cammas is an expert in this. We're going to dive into that. We talk about that off and on throughout the various episodes in our show because it is so important and so many companies are struggling with it. This is the first time we've had somebody who's truly an expert and helped many, many, many companies in this area. So we're going to dive into that here shortly. But before we do, Mike, will you kick us off with the news?
Good morning and welcome to the news. T-Mobile, if you don't recall, they had a data breach. They're about to cough up $500 million over the 2021 data breach. Just under a year ago, T-Mobile admitted a data breach after personal information about its customers was offered for sale on the dark web. At the time, Vice magazine claimed to have communicated with the hacker behind the breach via online chat and have been offered T-Mobile USA full customer info. That is social security numbers, phone numbers, names, physical addresses, IMEI numbers, driver's license information. Motherboard has seen samples of the data and confirmed they contained accurate information on T-Mobile customers. Apparently, more than 75 million people were affected in the breach, though with a standard payout listed by routers at $25 per person. But the lawyers get $105 million, so that makes it all fair. Kansas MSP shuts down cloud services to fend off cyber attack. A U.S. managed service provider, Net Standard, suffered a cyber attack, causing the company to shut down its My Apps Anywhere cloud services, consisting of hosted Dynamics, GP, Exchange, SharePoint, and CRM services. While the company says that only the My Apps Anywhere services are affected, the attack appears to have a broader impact, with the company's main site shut down as well. Phishing attacks skyrocket with Microsoft and Facebook as most abused brands. Big surprise. Phishing attacks resume in earnest, with criminals doubling down on fake messages abusing popular brands compared to the year prior. Microsoft, Facebook, and for some reason, French bank Crédit Agricole are the top abused brands in attacks, according to a recent study. According to the report by researchers at Vade, which is a cybersecurity research company, phishing attacks abusing the Microsoft brand increased by 266% in the first quarter of 2022, and fake Facebook messages are up 177% in the second quarter. The study by Vade analyzed unique instances of phishing URLs used by criminals carrying out phishing attacks and not the number of phishing emails associated with URLs. The report tallied the 25 most commonly targeted companies along with the most abused industries and days of the week of phishing email. Dovetailing off that, LinkedIn phishing target employees managing Facebook ad accounts. A new phishing campaign, codenamed Ducktail, is underway targeting professionals on LinkedIn to take over Facebook business accounts that manage advertising for the company. The operators at Ducktail have a narrow targeting scope, trying to find people who have admin privileges on their employees' social media accounts. The threat actor reaches out to employees on LinkedIn who could have Facebook business account access, for example, people listed as working in digital media or digital marketing. As part of the conversation with the potential target, the threat actors use social engineering and deception to convince them to download a file hosted on a legitimate cloud hosting service like Dropbox or iCloud. Windows Adobe Zero Day used to deploy Sub-Zero malware. Microsoft has linked a threat group known as Knotweed to an Austrian spyware vendor also operating as a cyber mercenary outfit named DSIRF. I don't know if that means something in Austrian. That targets European and Central American entities using a malware toolset dubbed Sub-Zero. DSIRF promotes itself as a company that provides information, research, forensics, and data-driven intelligence services to corporations. However, it has been linked to the development of Sub-Zero malware that customers can use to hack targets' phones, computers, network, and internet-connected devices. The primary Sub-Zero payload has many capabilities, including keylogging, capturing screenshots, exfilling data, and running remote shells and arbitrary plugins downloaded from the CNC server. Real quick, digital security giant Entrust breached by ransomware. Digital security giant Entrust confirmed that it suffered a cyber attack where threat actors breached their network and stole data from their internal systems. Entrust is a security firm focused on online trust and identity management. Depending on what data was stolen, this attack could impact a large number of critical and sensitive organizations. This list includes U.S. government agencies, Department of Energy, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Treasury. You get the idea. Hackers scan for vulnerabilities within 15 minutes of the disclosure. This means a lot to any network admin out there. System admins have less time to patch disclosed security vulnerabilities than previously thought. As a new report shows, hackers are constantly monitoring software vendor bulletin boards for new vulnerability announcements they can leverage for initial access to a corporate network or perform remote code execution. The 2022 Attack Surface Management Threat Report found that attackers typically start scanning for vulnerabilities within 15 minutes of a CVE being announced. Then, within hours, the first active exploitation attempts are observed, often hitting systems that never had a chance to patch. Palo Alto Unit 42 is one to compile this report, presents the recent F5 big IP product flaw that was announced in May. Apparently, within 10 hours, there were 2,500 plus scanning and exploitation attempts. So with that, Laura, what do you got?
Man, good stuff, Mike. I appreciate the news. It reminds me of a time when we built a sandbox network at a location and put a Windows Server, Windows 7 system online to the internet, and it was compromised in 47 minutes. So stuff happens pretty quick out there, pretty quick. So speaking of remote code execution, if you are one of the engineers out there that is using the remote procedure call Python library, you might want to get off version 4.2 all the way to 6 because there is a remote code execution for that library file. So if you're out there, you've got a remote procedure call being powered by Python, make sure you're upgrading to something beyond version 6. And for everybody out there who likes to do the smart homes and the connected Internet of Things, Schneider Electric Space Logic's C-Bus home controller 5200 has a remote code execution. So if you've used the Schneider Electric Space Logic in any capacity in your home or your office, make sure that you're taking a look at that and upgrading off of version 31, because the current version that's been recently released and previous versions are susceptible to this remote code execution. So you could suffer arbitrary code into some of your Internet of Things devices and possibly even denial of service or turning on things like your air conditioner, turning it off, and hopefully you didn't hook your gas range to this smart bus. So with that is exploits for this week. Zach, we're talking about how to keep your professionals and how to attract professionals. I'm excited.
We are. I'm just blown away by some of the news here. It sounds like cybersecurity is still a thing, I guess, huh?
It sounds like it. And you know, before we dive in, I did see something this morning that didn't make it to Mike's sheet that apparently an MSP has been compromised, and a hacker is saying that he's compromised the MSP and has access to over 50 clients that the MSP provides services for.
Nice. Yeah,
that's the first time, right? That's the first time that's happened?
Probably this month.
Sorry, Mike, what were you saying?
Well, there was a big one that was based in Florida that was over 3,000 clients. So it's a big deal. It happens out there.
Yeah,
one of the other things I didn't talk about, which is in the headlines that we're going to post, is that one of the number one attack vectors is now fintech. You're getting a lot of very sophisticated phishing attempts from B of A, Citicorp, Chase Bank that all look very realistic. Be very careful about what you click on.
So I shouldn't have reset my password from that email?
I wouldn't have, but as long as it's not the silent sector accounts, you're on your own.
Oh, you don't care about my money, just the silent sector. Got it.
No, not at all.
Thanks. You're a good friend, Mike. Appreciate it. Well, yeah, that's interesting. And I've also learned that we are the complete wrong business. If those attorneys got $105 million from the Verizon case, we're doing something wrong, guys. We got to
T-Mobile case.
T-Mobile case. I'm sorry, T-Mobile.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Let's get into some constructive discussion here. See if we can help those organizations out there that are struggling, finding, and just as importantly, or maybe more importantly, probably more importantly, retaining their talent. And we have expert Cammas Freeman here of StackRock Talent. This is her bread and butter. She knows this stuff inside and out and has a lot of very interesting insight that I had not heard from anybody else. So I would like to introduce Cammas. Cammas, thanks again for joining us. We're gonna bring you on in just a moment after a quick commercial break.
Want even more Cyber Rants? Be sure to subscribe to the Cyber Rants podcast. Get your copy of our best-selling book, Cyber Rants, on Amazon today. This podcast is brought to you by Silent Sector, the firm dedicated to building world-class cybersecurity programs for mid-market and emerging companies across the U.S. Silent Sector also provides industry-leading penetration tests and cyber risk assessments. Visit silentsector.com and contact us today.
And we're back with Cammas Freeman. Cammas, thanks again for joining us on the show. Glad to have you today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to be here.
Hey, would you mind starting off by just giving the audience, the millions and millions of listeners, I'm sure, out there, just some background, how, on not only what you're doing now, but what was your kind of path and finding that passion to doing what you're doing today?
Sure. Yeah, I think probably like most recruiters, I didn't actually start out going into recruiting. It's not like there's a college degree of recruiting. I actually started out as an IT project manager working at Hewlett Packard and kind of got connected with a IT services tech startup. And as I was working with them, I was the 20th employee. And as we grew and expanded, I just kind of naturally became a really good interviewer and identifier of good people, but also had a talent for getting those tech people interested in joining us. Mostly because I really, truly believed in the company and what we were doing. And it was just a really great experience. So fast forward through some other kind of ventures in marketing and operations and human resources. The last job I had before I started my own, I was head of global talent strategy for kind of a bigger company, $3.2 billion travel technology company, where we were hiring about 1,800 people a year. And that really kind of propelled me into this kind of niche area where I just really fell in love and figured out that I was really dang good at, which was employer branding and recruitment marketing and how that impacts the ability to attract and retain great talent, particularly in tech. So yeah, and then 3.5 years ago, I went out on my own, kind of with that same passion to help other companies. Really, I love the tech space. I love Boise, and that was kind of my, I guess, part about it was let me take what I've learned on this global level and help the companies here locally. But of course, since then, it's expanded outside of Boise.
Outstanding. Well, that's excellent. And $1,800 or 1,800 employees, did you say a year?
Right.
You were hiring at one time. That's a big lift. So
yeah,
must
there
have
was
had
a
a pretty
call
big
center
team.
component, which is high volume too. So that's part of how that kind of was such a big number.
Yeah. Wow. Well, so we talk a bit off and on in the show about just the struggles out there with
Mm,
cybersecurity professionals, especially, and a lot of IT as well. I mean, you look at their LinkedIn profiles, and they're at a new job every 12 to 18 months.
yeah.
What are companies doing wrong?
I mean, I don't, honestly, a lot of companies are doing it right. I think because of the demand for the tech talent, I mean, they are just in demand. So they're getting hit up by people like me all the time, right? Um, what I always kind of say is a company's first best recruiting strategy is their retention strategy, right? Like we don't want to recruit more. We want to keep the people we have longer. I never think of it like we're going to keep them forever because that's just unrealistic. But if you, just as you pointed out, if the average is 18 to 12 to 18 months, how can we keep them 24 months, right? How can we keep them a little bit longer? It's going to save the company money. You're going to have a better result because they're working on the product longer. So figuring out what is going to keep them, and it's different for companies. It's different based on whatever they're working on, but it's really up to the company to figure out what that is. And the biggest, I think, companies have is not finding out directly from their employees what that is, what is important to them. They kind of all sit in a room as a leadership and guess what employees want and try to put together, what if we did this? And I said, wait a minute, did you actually ask the employees what they want? And they're like, no. I mean, couldn't tell you, about 99% of the time that's the answer that I get. And it's kind of one of those things where it's pretty easy to ask the employees directly what it is they're looking for. And I think what companies find out is it's not often anything that's super expensive. It's just meaningful work, challenging work. I think companies miss that as an opportunity to keep their top talent engaged, is just giving them opportunities to do exciting, challenging work, whatever that is. And then, of course, other things too. But those are kind of the things that always stand out to me that are easy and free, right? You can ask a question and get a pretty, solid response or answer to the problem you're trying to solve.
Do you have any kind of methodology or any tips you would share for those organizations when they're going to ask their employees, collect that information? Do you have any method of going about that so you make sure that you're getting the honest answers, not the, some companies may be too far down the wrong path, and their people may just tell them what they want to hear. What's your advice on going about doing that to get the best possible insight?
Yeah, what my approach has always been is to talk to the kind of core key team's direct supervisor, because they typically have that better insight about what they're hearing from the employees. That's one place I go. And then I always think of, okay, who are my best employees? Who are the people, if I had 20 of them, like, we'd be killing it. And I go ask them. So for me, it's a lot of direct communication. Now, larger organizations, they're probably going to run surveys, and some of that data and that process is good, but you have to actually talk to people. Like, you're not going to get that information. And then also the other is having a third party actually ask those questions, like myself. We do that too, because we're going to get information that they're not going to get, that we can get at, because we're a third party, right? So there's kind of multiple things. It's not just one thing. There is a test, so NPS in marketing, right? Net Promoter Score. Well, there's also a Net Promoter Score, which is an employer brand metric that you basically ask your employee base one question: would you refer our company as a place to work to your friends or family? And the second question is just like an open-ended, like, why or why not? But that score is very telling about specifically your employer brand as a place to work, both internally, while you're asking your employees, so from your internal employee base. So
that's an excellent question to ask. I mean, whether you're using a system to do it or not, just to ask,
right.
And get that information. That's really, really good. What else can companies do to kind of help themselves retain employees longer, especially in the tech world? What other types of things? Because I mean, money's great, but as we see, it's not all about the money, right? There are a lot of people that we talk to every day that make a ton of money and are miserable at their jobs. So what else would you recommend?
The number one thing that I hear, and I mean, it's not going to be a surprise, is investing in good leaders and making sure that whoever's managing those developers that you want to keep better be really dang good, because that is the biggest impact as to whether someone's going to want to make a move or not. And I think it is, in my 20 years, whatever, it is the most overlooked opportunity to do better, retain employees, that is not taken. And also, even when you're placing people into those roles, Probably you've maybe seen this in your career as someone's an outstanding individual contributor and they're like, great, you're so amazing. Let's put you into this team leader leadership role with no training. Then they're expected to interview potential new people. They don't know how to interview. I mean, it's just a like really missed opportunity that is one of the number one causes of people wanting to make a change.
It makes a lot of sense. I heard, it reminds me of a quote, the most people don't leave their jobs, they leave their managers.
Yeah.
Would you say that's accurate?
I would say absolutely. I mean, there's other factors too, but I think consistently that's the number one thing. And if I was a company, one of the areas where I feel like people do not interview or consider for when they're putting people into those leadership positions is self-awareness. Like the number one thing in my 20-year career of what makes someone a poor leader is like lack of self-awareness around their leadership or their ability. And we don't interview for that, right? We just are like, oh, you're good, you're whatever these, kind of charismatic aspects, but we don't interview for that. And that's something that I've seen really cause a lot of problems.
Do you have a method or something that's worked well? I mean, do you like the EQ scores or anything like that
Mm.
that you would recommend if you're an organization looking for leaders? What do you need to look for?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get asked that a lot about assessments and these things. And I'm probably not the best person to ask because I've never used an assess at one time in my entire career
Mhm.
because I just figured out how to ask really good questions. However, not everybody has 20 years of experience of figuring out how to dig out stuff, right? And so there are tools out there. I don't haven't used them personally, so I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But
Um,
I think they're worth. I mean, I think there's value in them. I think what I've seen people mistake is put 100% weight in them and not consider anything. And I think that is also a mistake.
yeah, and I could see, it's a lot easier to send out a link and say, hey, fill out this form than it is to actually sit down and talk with somebody for an hour. So I could see that,
Yeah,
why a lot of companies lean so heavily on them.
yeah.
But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think there's it does seem to just be a big disconnect in kind of what employers, I think, certainly Mike and Laura bring this up a lot in some of our other episodes, but what employers think that their team wants versus what they want, especially on the technical side.
Mm.
And I'd be curious to your thoughts because we have a lot of times what we hear is the HR team is trying to do the hiring, but they don't
Mhm.
understand the job that they're
Mhm.
hiring for at all in most cases. And so it can be a real disconnect from what they're putting out there
Mhm.
in the job market, the ads and all that stuff, and what they're actually looking for in a person. Whereas when that person gets in to the technical team, they're not necessarily a fit or
Mhm.
don't have the right skill set or whatever the case may be. Are any recommendations, anything that people could do to better align
Mhm.
their their search for technical people
Mhm.
specifically? Because I believe it's not really a one size fits all kind of approach.
Yeah, I mean, really, just in general, the approach should be more like a marketing lead generation effort, right? Like we're kind of outwardly talking about things that we know our ideal candidate cares about. So if I was a CTO or a senior leader, I would be posting content. I would be talking about things that ideal candidate cares about because the number one thing we see is they want to know who that leader is that they're going to report it to because that's what matters to them. However, a lot of tech people more now don't post a lot of content. They're not on video. They're not accessible. In fact, I see a lot of them, I think, because maybe they're getting hit up by so many people like me. They block their ability to connect with them, but what they're also doing is blocking potential candidates to connect with them too, right? And so I think, from the HR perspective, actually going out and sourcing or pre-screening people, things like that. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely ways to work with the hiring manager to understand if they're going to be doing that job, what it is that they're actually looking for, and what that sounds like, what that looks like. I mean, I don't know every technology. I mean, we're fairly new to cybersecurity, and so but we know how to dig in to get what we need from the hiring manager. If the hiring managers aren't giving that time to their recruiting team, that's a problem, because I have to understand like who you really are. Great. A job description's great. I don't even look at it. I just ask the questions like, what are you really looking for? What are those top 3 things you have to have? What does that look like? What kind of experience have they done? What kind of projects have they done? Like, it's just all this really in-depth information. So you don't have to be super technical to be able to get someone assessed in that first round. But what I also often see is the hiring manager is so busy, they're not giving that time to those people. So that's one, I guess, kind of aspect of what could be done better that I see consistently to help them get that first round of candidates that's better aligned.
You mentioned touching on the LinkedIn portion and blocking people. One of the things I know that you do differently is help leaders, technical leaders, and technology people in general brand themselves better so that candidates are attracted to them. And I think that's interesting, because going back to the people don't leave the company, they leave their managers. And in many cases, probably the majority of cases, people want to work with good people. And we've heard that as well from people that we've hired kind of on an intern basis and emerging technologists. They say, I really want a good mentor. I really want somebody that can help me grow in my career. And that is so, so important to them. So let's talk a little bit about that, about kind of that personal branding versus the corporate branding, and why that helps people stand out.
Yeah, I always say if you're a good leader and you're a good company, you don't want to be the best kept secret in this market, right? And what I find is there are some really great people, there's great companies, but they're not talking about it. So how would anybody know? And when these type of roles are so in demand, you're basically compelling someone to leave the job they have and come work for you. So you have to be talking about things that are compelling to that people, right? And how I find out about what's compelling is I, again, say, who are your top people? Like, if you had more of those, what would I go talk to them? I say, where do you spend your time online? What are you doing? What do you care about? Who do you follow? All these things. And we target how we talk about things in that way. So what we've done in the past is we had a shy CTO. We had to ramp up a tech office in a very short amount of time. And we did the work to figure out, and we basically ran a campaign and made video clips, a long-term video, but it was all about him talking about his vision and where the technology was going, what that looked like, how he ran his team, how he engaged with people, what he was looking for. And it worked. Like, we basically saved the company $200,000 in recruiting costs just by putting, that was part of it, but getting this guy out in front so that people could really feel connected to him to want to consider joining. Now, they may have seen something 5, 6, 7, 8 times, kind of the marketing rule, 8 touches to conversion, right? 8 to 10 touches. It's the same thing with hiring. So the mistake is companies go, we need this role, post a job. Well, where's the 8 to 10 touches before that? Because you're going directly to conversion without everything before it. So those are the things that these leaders, and the thing is, they don't have to be great copywriters and all these things, because there's people that do that. like we do that, right? Like I get it. Like it's not comfortable. I mean, you and I talked about that, right? Like it's not everybody's skill set. It's not even my skill set. I mean, I figured it out, but there are ways to accomplish that. And the thing is, all these companies are always going to be hiring, always going to be hiring tech talent. You need to constantly build that pipeline. It's not we need a job now, everybody freak out, and we're going to, reactively go look for this person. It's something you do all the time. So when you do have that role, they've already seen you multiple times and they're like, that person's awesome. That's somebody I'd want to work for. Now I see they're hiring. I want to know more. So those are kind of the strategies that, I've used to kind of hire people in tough markets for different companies. But companies can do that on their own too.
What I always found when, this is all very interesting, and I actually was scrolling through, and we actually have a chapter on this in our book that we wrote, and we talked about this. But, coming up to the ranks, one of the things that I always found that caused me to move jobs was you're talking about management. Management does not have your back. Is immediately jump. Why not take another 10 grand from somewhere else? Because why not? The other thing was that companies don't tell you out front what they provide for you, and they don't really take care of the employee and reinvest in the employee. And one of the key things that always was important as someone who self-funded all of his certifications is pay for your people to get trained, pay for them to get educated, pay for them to be able to advance their skill set. But you have to go hand in hand and keep their pay commensurate with their skill set, because I find there's a lot of times you just got pigeonholed. Oh, he's an infrastructure engineer 4. His is his pay range, and it's not taking into account his skill set or anything of that nature. So companies need to be more flexible and understand cybersecurity talent is different than the exchange admin or whatever, but IT talent is different than the accountant and the clerical and those kind of resources. So you can't treat everybody the same, and I find that in a lot of big companies are that way. That's what I found, and a lot of things like at the early point in my career, company felt that if they gave us pizza every day and had power beers in a stock fridge, we'd work ourselves to death. Well, that's not really the case anymore. So, I can buy my own pizza, thanks.
There's nothing like a skivvy Lumberg, non-technical, good old boy network manager to make you leave your job. Like that is by far one of the number one reasons that Mike and I wouldn't even give you the podium of populace to call out your dirty name, sirs. But we've worked for some terrible managers. And I have a question for you. So, for all of you Lumberg managers out there, on CyberSeek is reporting 714,548 available cybersecurity jobs in the United States today. And Cammas, my question is, with the Great Resignation, kind of this new age kind of work walkout idealism, and it's picked up a lot of steam with the Reddit subreddit anti-work. What message would you have for managers that are kind of in that danger space of being so completely clueless they're about to lose their team?
Yeah. So one of, and starts so easy. There's a lot of things, but one of the best CTOs I worked with, what it was about him is he cared about people as human beings first. And that was the foundation of it all. And that created a sense of loyalty and wanted to be a part of that. I mean, it's just so crazy, right? Like it really is that easy. And I think what you said, Mike, was about standing up for the employees. I mean, managers are in a tough position because they're getting hammered on to deliver and different things. But their team, just like any team, right? You have a basketball team, whatever, whoever that person, that leader is, they have to have your back. Every single
Yeah.
person has to feel like you are part of something that, and they care about you as a person, not as a worker. And I think just that shift in mindset going from, of course, HP, some of these older school mentalities of you should be lucky to have a job, and how you get ahead is work a million hours a week, and then maybe you're going to get this thing. Like, that mindset is out the door. That is no longer going to work, particularly coming the younger generations coming up. Um, those people will lose
Yeah, I
if they don't
wholeheartedly.
shift that. And there's a kind of an idea that they think, oh, they just want all this free stuff and stuff. And it's really not. I mean, are there people like that? Sure. But it's really not that. They just want to be cared about as human beings first, and what goes along with that.
Oh, I agree with that. Although generational difference here, I'm older than Zach and Laurel, and I remember managers, hello, how you doing was a perfunctory conversation. They couldn't care less, just get your job done. So,
Hmm.
but that's old generation stuff. That's when I was growing up. So, but yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. There's a lot of,
Well, there's a lot of that going on still, Mike.
yeah,
I think that's probably one of the most beautiful messages in this whole podcast is just treat your people like humans and not
yeah,
like some statistic to get work done. And I see the common theme on, this anti-work, kind of, you know, movement, I guess is what you would call it, is that is the foundational core message of why all of these individuals post up their 2 week notices and their correspondence with their bosses and their text messages with their bosses. All of these managers are causing these people to quit simply because they're not caring about them as humans first. They're saying, I don't care that your grandmother died. You need to come into work tomorrow. You're scheduled
right.
to work. And it's like, how can you be so clueless in a world like we have today, right? But I mean, it obviously it still happens, and it's
Well,
obviously your loss will be some other company's great gain, right?
well,
Right.
yeah, and that's the other thing is that there is the mentality, and I took this. I was a mercenary when I started. I knew there was another job out there, so if I didn't like it, manager ticked me off on Friday afternoon. I'd go find a job on Monday. Not a big deal. Just do it. And then in this environment, especially, it's like that. Politics are also a big deal. You don't want your technical people being involved in politics. That's the manager's job. He needs to protect your technical people from that. Um, so that's one of the big things as well. Although, to talk about caring for people, you can't swing so far as I read something about, the whole Twitter deal where, they have a day of rest and reconciliation every month, or every week, where the entire company takes a day off to be de-stressed. That's taking a little too far in my perspective. You should be able to handle 5 days a week. So,
Yeah. There's definitely a balance.
yeah,
Yeah. Or 410s is good too. But during the
yeah,
summers, when you're
Yeah.
yeah,
camping a lot on the weekends.
yeah.
It's really just about like flexibility. That's the number one thing I hear. They just want some flexibility. The rigidity of kind of the old ways, the 8 to 5 button seat thing is no longer.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things that we talk about in the book as well is that you get people that mid in their late 20s, early 30s that are starting family. They want to go pick up their kid at school at 2 o'clock. Well, fine, let them do that. Let them work from home from 3 to 7, or whatever. If they, you've got a millennial who likes to game till 2 o'clock in the morning, or whatever the generation after them is. Don't Do they really need to come in at 8? Can he come in at 10? That kind of thing. There are those flexibility pieces because I mean honestly most of the work that I do, especially documentation, is done after 7 o'clock at night, simply because that's when I feel like writing. So
Yeah. Well,
Well, I think the interesting thing is that, we've had the capability for remote work since the early 2000s.
yeah,
We've just, managers never wanted to allow it because they always believed that they had to have physical access to the human to make sure they were doing their work. And
right,
then we had the pandemic, and now we've got this 20-year-old technology all of a sudden that's letting everybody work remote. And now nobody wants to come back to the office, and you can't blame them, right? I mean, because now we've proven that we can be efficient and handle priorities and do project-based work, not having to be at the office.
yeah,
well, there's a lot of great stuff came out of today, and one thing that struck my attention too, Cammas, when you mentioned just the sheer cost savings. I mean, even if you're just a heartless human being, at least look at the numbers,
Yeah.
and just look at what it costs you to replace people, and the self branding. I know a lot of technical people don't want to do the self branding. They don't want to step into that leadership role, improve their capabilities there. But there's so much power and, again, cost savings in that. Just do it if you're out there listening to this and you're
Yes.
not. I think there's gold in that approach, Cammas, and I never really hear people talking about that at all. So I appreciate you sharing that. And we're coming up on time here, but any last words of wisdom for the listeners out there? Anything you would leave them with?
Yeah, I think, this is an amazing space to be in. And I think if you are a leader, these are all important things that we've talked about to focus on to retain your teams. And I don't really see it changing. So it's kind of, let's kind of get on board with doing the right thing. And ultimately, everyone's going to be better off, the company, the manager, the employees. So I think it's really important. And the hope is that when I reach out to people, they say, no, I don't want to make a move because I'm really happy. But I'll tell you, right now it's about 10% of the time. So
Wow.
let's move the dial on that. I'm saying that, but I know it can be better, and I do care about the employees and the candidates. So I think we can all do better.
Yeah, and I think just dovetailing off that, throwing money at the situation is not the answer. If you're in a miserable working environment, then it doesn't matter the amount of money that they're going to pay you. It's why stay and be miserable.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. In the Army, I got to work with a huge number of people, different leaders, and I came to the conclusion that there's two types of leader. My simple mind kind of boiled it down to two types of leaders. And there's the one type of leader is the leader that you really, you push hard for because you don't want to get crushed. There's a fear factor there. You don't want to get in trouble because that can be painful. The other type of leader is the leader that you don't want to disappoint because you have so much respect and gratitude and admiration for that leader. And that I put them on one side of the coin or the other. And it makes a lot of sense because I think those leaders that you do anything for because you don't want to disappoint, those are the leaders that people will stick around. Those are the ones that care about their people. So excellent message. Cammas, how can people find you, get a hold of you, people that need help in this area, which there are a lot? How can they reach out?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I spend a lot of time on there. Come to our website, StackRock Talent, or email me directly, cammas@stackrocktalent.com.
Outstanding. Yep. And we will paste your information in the webpage show notes for this episode. So those of you listening, jump on our website, cyberrantspodcast.com. Check out the show notes there. You'll have links and Cammas's information to connect. So thanks again for joining us. Hope everybody enjoyed this episode of the Cyber Rants podcast. I certainly did. And there are just some great takeaways from today. So if you like the podcast, please rate us, share it around, get this information out there, share it on social media, whatever platforms you might be on, and help us get the word out. Our goal here is really to protect the backbone of the American economy and our way of life. And that starts with the right information. So that's our objective here, is to get that information out. That said, at cyberrantspodcast.com, you can submit your requests for topics that you want to hear about in the future, or questions or anything of that nature. Check us out there and have a great day. We will see you on the next episode.
Pick up your copy of the Cyber Rants book on Amazon today. And if you're looking to take your cybersecurity program to the next level, visit us online at www.silentsector.com. Join us next time for another edition of the Cyber Rants podcast.